Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to all of you here and to those joining us online or this camera. I'm not sure which camera I'm supposed to look at. This one. Hello. All the things you have to remember. So joining me today is Pastor Ryan. He's going to narrate our program. We are going to share, I'm going to share some arrangements. He's going to share some background information and stories on 7 hymns. We're going to look at 6 of them are Lent hymns. One is an Easter hymn. The book Then Sings My Soul is a 3-volume set written by Robert J. Morgan, and it's the source for today's information and narrative. He's a pastor in Nashville, Tennessee, and has written over 300 stories has written 3 volumes of over 300 hymns and their backgrounds and their stories and histories. I think this is the 4th program we have done, 3 of them being hymns, 1 of them we did in December that was Christmas carols. So, welcome. We hope you enjoy. Let's get started.
Well, thank you to Schuyler for inviting me to narrate. You notice he said narrate and not do any singing, not do any musical piece, so that's good. This started out as in the pandemic and thinking it would be something that would be interesting to do, something we could do online, and it was fascinating to me to use the books that he just mentioned, but also some other, online research to find out more about the backstories of the hymns. And so I was delighted to be able to do a little more digging. So if you are in this place and you have a hymnal in front of you, 6 of the 7 hymns are in the hymnal, and I will give you page numbers, hymn numbers, as we go along. So if you want to refer to the actual lyrics, you can do that. We're starting with All Glory, Laud, and Honor. It's number 192 in the hymnal. So this is a hymn that we sing almost every Palm Sunday. So we're starting with a Palm Sunday hymn, and I gave Schuyler special dispensation to sing an Easter hymn, even though we're only on Lent 2. This is a hymn we sing almost every Palm Sunday. It's one of the oldest hymns that we have, and certainly the oldest in our program today. The hymn was written in 820 A.D. and originally had 78 verses. So Schuyler and I decided we might do all 78, and we'll call out for pizza for dinner, and all will be good. So why 78 verses? Well, it's complicated. So our 2 main characters in this drama are Theodulf, the Bishop of Orleans, which is a city south of Paris, France. He wrote the hymn. Our other character is Louis I, who assumed the throne of king when his father Charlemagne died. So Louis tried to divide the empire between a nephew and 4 sons, and that was a disaster. Twice, Louis was deposed by his sons and regained the throne both times. So in the midst of all this political intrigue, Theodulf was accused, falsely it seems, for conspiring with King Bernard of Italy. So Louis was becoming more and more paranoid and could barely sleep at night. So he had Theodulf imprisoned at the monastery of Angers, southwest of Paris, on Easter Sunday, 818. There, he meditated on Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem and wrote this hymn, and wrote, and wrote, and wrote 78 verses. So according to tradition, that can neither be confirmed or denied. When King Louis visited Angers, he stopped at the monastery, and the bishop was at his window of his cell singing this hymn. The king was so moved that he ordered his release. So whether it happened that way or not, Theodulf was released in 821, but died on his way back to Orleans. So here are not all 78 verses, but just a few verses of all glory, laud, and honor. Yeah, very nice. The next one is Alas, and Did My Savior Bleed? It's number 204 in the hymnal. It would be a great understatement to say that Isaac Watts was a prolific hymn writer. He is credited with writing some 750 hymns. Most of them have faded, but with that number, even if 10% of them survived, that's still a lot. Watts displayed a propensity for rhyme at an early age. He was once asked in school why he had his eyes open during prayers, to which he responded, "A little mouse for want of stairs ran up the rope to say its prayers." He received corporal punishment for that, to which he cried, "O Father, Father, pity take, and no more verses make." I'm guessing there was more corporal punishment for that. Most of Isaac Watts' hymn writing took place when he was in his late teens, 20s, and 30s, even though he lived to the age of 74. This one was written in 1707 when he was 33 and was in a hymn book called Hymns and Spiritual Songs that was published that same year. Watts was the pastor at Mark Lane Independent Chapel in London for 50 years. This hymn in that first hymnal was actually called Godly Sorrow Arising from the Sufferings of Christ, but later hymnals called it what we know it as today. Perhaps the most impactful story surrounding this hymn is that another prolific hymn writer of the 19th century, Fanny Crosby, credited this song with her conversion to Jesus Christ. At the age of 31, in 1851, she attended a revival in New York City when she sang the line from the 5th stanza, which is the 4th in our hymnal, that says, "Here, Lord, I give myself away 'tis all that I can do. She remembers in her words, my very soul was flooded with celestial light. Other works of Isaac Watts that you would recognize include the hymn we'll talk about next, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross, Joy to the World, and Our God, O God, Our Help in Ages Past. So here is Alas, and Did My Savior Bleed? It'll start with the hymn tune in the hymnal, and then Schuyler will move to an alternate tune. The next hymn is When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. I just mentioned that. It's number 195 in the hymnal. And since we've already just talked about Isaac Watts, who wrote the lyrics to this hymn in 1707, I thought it would be nice to nod to the actual musicians and not just to the poets. So if you have a hymnal in your hand, at the bottom of each page is who wrote the words and who wrote the music. And many times they are different. It also lists a date, and that is also different. When I Survey the Wondrous Cross was written by Isaac Watts, but this tune was written by Lowell Mason in 1823, 116 years after the text was written. Lowell Mason has an interesting story. He was an American music director and a banker who was a leading figure in 19th century church music. He composed over 1,600 hymn tunes, many of which are often sung today. Some of the ones you would recognize include an arrangement to Joy to the World, the tune Bethany, which sets the hymn text, Nearer My God to Thee, and Mason also set the music to Mary Had a Little Lamb. He is largely credited for introducing music into the American public schools and is considered the first important U.S. music educator. So Mason, in the first part of his career, worked undercover as a composer. He published his first hymnal anonymously because he thought it would damage his reputation as a banker to be known as a musician. Finally, he accepted a position as music director for Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church in New York in 1853. He immediately disbanded its choir and its orchestra and installed an organ with his son William serving as the organist. He was not much on the choir performing, developed congregational singing to the point where the church was known for having the finest congregational singing in the city. He eventually brought the choir back and relented. I'm sure that was sort of a church fight in itself. This part of his career probably had the most enduring effect on American church music, that congregational singing piece. He personally changed his view from imagining that congregations would be reluctant to sing to thinking that they wanted to sing. So he vigorously promoted congregational singing. So this is Watts, Isaac Watts, and Mason's, Lowell Mason's, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. This one is "And Can It Be?" It is not in the hymnal. So in the interest of full disclosure, this is the only one of the 7 that we are considering today that I have never heard before. So I appreciate the opportunity to expand my music knowledge, which I will admit is a low bar. This hymn was written in 1738 by Charles Wesley and sometimes goes by the longer title of "And Can It Be That I Should Gain?" So Charles, you likely know that name, along with his brother John, were college students in Oxford, England, when they began to seek to live a Christian life. They did this so methodically that other college students started dubbing them Methodists. After graduation, they both volunteered to come to the American colony known as Georgia as missionaries, and they were both miserable failures. Charles was said to be so autocratic and demanding that he insisted on baptizing infants not by sprinkling, but by immersion, and not once, but 3 times. One angry mother fired a gun at him after baptizing her child. It's just a hunch that the Methodist Church would not have grown into the movement it is today had they kept that practice. Charles left America ill and depressed, and John soon followed. They attended a Moravian meeting on May 21st, 1738, after which Charles wrote, "I now found myself at peace with God and rejoiced in hope of loving Christ. I saw that by faith I stood." It was his conversion moment. 2 days later, Charles wrote in his journal, "I began a hymn upon my conversion." We aren't certain which hymn it was, he doesn't say, but most historians think it was this one because of its 4th stanza. "Long my imprisoned spirit lay, fast bound in sin and nature's night. Thine eye diffused a quickening ray, I woke, the dungeon flamed with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free, I rose, went forth, and followed thee. And can it be that I should gain?" So my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was a Wesleyan Methodist lay minister, and I went to a number of revivals with him, and I'm starting to rethink my statement that I've never heard that before. There's just the faintest of bells. So the next one is a favorite. The Old Rugged Cross. It is number 548 in the hymnal. George Bennard was born in 1873 in Youngstown, Ohio. He was the son of a coal miner. At 15, he lost his father to a mining accident in Iowa. So the young man went to work in a western Illinois coal mine to support his mother and 4 sisters. He entered the Christian ministry through the Salvation Army. He and his wife, Arminda, became officers in 1898 and served for nearly a decade. George was later ordained in the Methodist Episcopal denomination. His evangelistic work took him to Michigan and Canada, Wisconsin, and New York. But while in Michigan, it provided Christianity with this hymn, a hymn that has taken on a life of its own. The birth of the song occurred sometime late 1912, early 1913. Bennard had been conducting revival services out of state, but returned to Michigan and lived in an apartment across from Albion College. A soul-trying experience prompted him to reflect on the cross of Christ. These are his words and how he tells the story. The inspiration came to me one day when I was staying in Albion, Michigan. I began to write the Old Rugged Cross. I composed the melody first. The words that I first wrote were imperfect. The words of the finished hymn were put into my heart in answer to my own need. So soon afterward, Bennard did evangelistic meetings in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, before going on to Pokagon, Michigan. He took with him the first verse and the chorus of the Old Rugged Cross. So while in Sturgeon Bay, he completed the hymn and taught it to 4 choir members, where it was given its first public performance. That night, his host family offered to pay the fees to have it printed. It soon began appearing in hymnals across America, and 3 cities have laid claim to being the birthplace of the Old Rugged Cross: Albion, Sturgeon Bay, Pokagon. The arrangement that Schuyler is going to play has the first 2 verses set in a minor key that underscores the agony of the cross. The performance notes say that this arrangement starts in a style of the great romantics like Rachmaninoff, then is a welcome relief when the key shifts to C major as the 4th stanza speaks to the joy that awaits us in heaven. The Old Rugged Cross. That is a powerful piece, especially that minor. The next one is O Sacred Head Now Wounded. It's number 202 in the hymnal. This hymn is ascribed or thought to be written by Bernard, later called Bernard of Clairvaux. He was born into a knight's family in a French castle in the year 1090. He was highly educated, a born leader, but he felt called to the monastic way of life. But I think his leadership skills and the monastic way of life didn't quite mix at first, so he started his own monastery. At the age of 25, he founded a monastery at Clairvaux, a town near the French-Swiss border. He would remain there the rest of his life. He had a brilliant mind, great wisdom, and over the years, kings and popes would travel to Clairvaux for counsel. Historian Harold Brown wrote this about Bernard: the ability of one man without political office or power to change history solely by his teaching and example is without parallel until the 16th century, when Martin Luther would once again transform Europe from his pulpit and professor's chair in a small town in Saxony. Bernard fought heresy and helped preserve the doctrine of the Trinity, but he also supported Christian militants like Knights Templar who literally fought to preserve European Christianity. So it's hard to know whether to like him or dislike him. So maybe we just leave that judgment to God and appreciate the hymn that he penned in 1153 as we meditate with him on the sufferings of Christ, O Sacred Head Now Wounded. The last hymn that we'll consider today, as Schuyler mentioned, is actually an Easter hymn. It is Crown Him with Many Crowns. It's number 234 in the hymnal. And this may, of the ones that we've considered today, sort of ranks right up there in terms of story with the one that had 78 stanzas. This hymn is the only hymn that I've ever heard of that is a true smash-up between two hymn texts. So in the hymnal at the bottom, if you're looking at it, you'll see that the lyrics are attributed to two people, Matthew Bridges in 1851 and Godfrey Thring in 1874. There's a reason, and here's the backstory of those two names. Matthew Bridges originally wrote a 6-stanza hymn based on Revelation 19:12, where it says, "On his head were many crowns." He called the hymn the Song of the Seraphs. He once wrote a book condemning Roman Catholics, but ended up converting to Catholicism in 1848. Verse 2 of that original hymn was, "Crown him the Virgin Son, the God incarnate born, whose arm those crimson trophies won which now his brow adorn. Fruit of the mystic rose, as of the rose the stem, the root whence mercy ever flows, the babe of Bethlehem." So in 1874, Godfrey Thring, a staunch Anglican clergyman, came along and liked the hymn, but thought that it smacked too much of the Catholic doctrine. So he wrote 6 verses of his own. So now there are 12 verses to the hymn in 2 different versions. Over the years, hymn book editors didn't know what to do with that. So, over the years, hymn book editors mixed and matched. They would take the first line of one verse from Bridges and the second line of a verse from Thring, and what we are left with then are 4 verses that are a true smash-up from 2 different hymn writers. And while we're still in Lent, this is our last hymn of the day. It is a true resurrection hymn. Crown him with many crowns.
I'll stand here and hopefully I'm in a camera. Thank you, Ryan, for your research and writing and narrating our program today. It's always fun to learn new things about hymns that we sing all the time but may not know the information behind them. Next week, Travis Person will be the musician presenting the concert. He is the organist at Zionsville United Methodist Church, and I've seen his program, and there's several familiar tunes I think you'll recognize. So I hope you'll join us back here next Thursday at 1 o'clock. So thank you, and God bless.